Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Paul Hutchinson, and I'm delighted that you found us, and I hope that you find the next hour or so entertaining and informative about the world of football. What have we got for you this time? Well, the first few segments are all going to be about Bundesliga. We'll look back at the latest round of games in the Bundesliga, and we'll look forward to the Englische Woche, which is the German phrase for a round of midweek games, and there's some pretty tasty ties coming up in Germany. So we'll take a look at that. We'll have a roundup of the big news in all of the various different leagues, especially in Europe and MLS. We'll look at the transfer market and see what the rumours are being bandied around of where different players are going to end up. And then in the final part of the podcast, we'll continue the segment I'm calling Around the World in 80 Soccer Moments, and this week we're going to focus on the Battle of Santiago in the 1962 World Cup and England's humiliating defeat at the hands of Iceland in Euro 2016. Alright, well I think that's going to be absolutely plenty. As always, we would like for you to get involved. The best way to do that is via our social media outlets. We are at GSMC_soccer on Twitter and Instagram, so if there's anything that you'd like to comment on that is raised in the next hour or so, I'd really like to hear from you. I think with that, let's get cracking then. So we'll turn our attention to what happened in the Bundesliga this weekend. And the Bundesliga got off to an early start, actually. There was a game on Friday, first of all, and that was the Berlin derby between Hertha and Union. Kicked off at 11:30. Nice early start for the weekend. It was close in the first half, not a great deal of action. Hertha probably had the better of it, honestly, but it was 0-0 at half-time. And then Ibisevic got the scoring underway with a good header, good work on the left-hand side, great cross in, and scored very clinically. Then Luca Bacchio, seconds after the restart from the first goal, gets on the end of a through ball. The centre-half doesn't exactly cover himself in glory. He's able to round the keeper and slot it in before a diving defender can get to it. So it's 2-0 within seconds of scoring the first. Then Cunha, he slots one home from outside of the area to make it 3-0. And then Boyata, with about quarter of an hour to go in the game, confirms the win. Corner comes in. He's the strongest of anyone that wants the ball, slams the header home, and a fairly routine win for Hertha Berlin, in all honesty. At the start of that game, there was only 1 point between them, and so Hertha put a bit of distance between their local rivals after that game, and also now Union Berlin, they're kind of looking over their shoulders a little bit. They're only 4 points now from the relegation spots, so what looked fairly comfortable a couple of weeks ago is now looking a little bit more sinister. They have yet to score since the restart of the season. Luckily, though, for them, they have a game to come midweek, so maybe they can start getting it in that onion bag. As for Hertha, they're looking towards maybe 6th place now. They are currently only 5 points behind Wolfsburg, who is in 6th, so they, I think, can start to relax a little bit about not getting relegated and maybe push on to sneak into that final European spot. Moving on then to the Saturday games, and the big game of the weekend really, with the most riding on it, was the game between Borussia Mönchengladbach and Bayer Leverkusen. And that was on at 6:30 in the morning, and it didn't really disappoint. Both teams, it was a Champions League 6-pointer. It was a really good game in actual fact, with Bayer opening the scoring fairly early on, with Havertz, who is actually absolutely on fire. He makes a lovely run. He's spotted by one of his teammates and he just puts it past the goalkeeper. Very clinically done. But then, that was the score at half time. Gladbach needed to score first, and that's what they did. They equalised through Thuram. A little mistake from the centre of defence. Thuram thumped it home. Really good goal. That's Thuram now 2-2, having scored last week. And then a really soft penalty, I thought, was given in favour of Leverkusen. Havertz converted it. The goalkeeper diving to his right, almost got a paw on it. Not enough though, and Havertz got his second goal, which is now 4-2 for him. Final bit of action was Bender, who met a ball in from the right-hand side. An unusual looking header. I don't think he directed the header in the way that he wanted to. Didn't matter. It went in, and a really handy win for Bayer Leverkusen, who go above Borussia Mönchengladbach on the strength of that win. Yeah, Gladbach were certainly the main losers of this weekend's round of games. Leipzig and Bayer Leverkusen go above Borussia Mönchengladbach, who now move into 5th and out of the Champions League places. One nice thing that happened though in this game was the home fans were able to be there in spirit. There was a company that was connected to Gladbach who have been offering the chance of fans to pay a little bit of money to have their picture on a cardboard cutout of themselves and placed on their regular season ticket seat, which is a really nice thing. And plenty of people seem to have taken them up on that offer. There's plenty of these cardboard cutouts in the stands, and it was actually kind of nice. It was a little bit of colour, and I believe some of the money is also going to go to charities for people that have been affected by COVID-19 pandemic. So it was a really nice thing, and honestly, yeah, it did raise a smile on my face, I have to say. It was really lovely. But they did not get the result they wanted. A nice effort from the club to try in these harrowing times to involve the support as much as they can. Really good effort. Freiburg, they were hosting Werder Bremen, who really, really struggling, desperately needed a win, and they got one. A really hard-fought win in the end. They were very happy to have Davy Klaassen back. It was his through ball that put Bittencourt through. Really good first-time pass and then first-time shot from outside of the box. Really good goal. Towards the end, though, it was getting a little bit desperate there. Werder Bremen did actually have a man sent off, and it was really Rourke's drift towards the end. It looked like that Freiburg had gotten a very, very late equaliser. It was Gilder who stabbed up a deflected shot off the post into the goal, but after VAR, it was ruled offside. The initial ball in, Gilder was indeed offside. So the goal was ruled out. They kept on going, and they just about got away with a 1-0 win for Werder Bremen, which is absolutely massive for them. They're still in the relegation zone, but they have more of a lifeline than it looked certainly at the start of last week. So things are tightening up slightly down at the bottom there, and Werder Bremen will be delighted with those 3 points. All right, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll round up the rest of the games in Bundesliga from this weekend. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Alright, welcome back. In the previous section, we started our look at the Bundesliga and the round of games that happened this weekend. We're going to look at some of the title contenders now, starting with the visit of Borussia Dortmund to Wolfsburg. This happened at 6:30 on Saturday, and you could follow this on Fox Sports. A pretty sort of routine win, nothing spectacular, I don't think, from Borussia Dortmund. They just did enough, maybe having a little bit of an eye on the midweek game between them and Bayern Munich. But it was good work by Hazard on the right-hand side. He cut a ball back from the byline, and uncharacteristically, actually, Haaland took a bit of an air shot at it, totally missed the ball coming to him. It then landed at the feet of Guerrero, who slotted it home, absolutely no trouble whatsoever. This was after half an hour of kind of huffing and puffing a little bit. No real clear-cut chances, in all honesty, for Borussia up to that point. Wolfsburg did have opportunities to equalise, but didn't take them. Lots of one-on-ones with the goalkeeper that they didn't capitalise on. And it was actually late on in the game that Hakimi scored. The ball broke to Jadon Sancho, who ran with the ball, basically unchallenged for about 25 yards. Nicely weighted pass into the path of Hakimi, who was running along beside him. Smashed it in the opposite corner, and a 2-0 comfortable win in the end. There was a red card towards the end. Klaus got sent off for Wolfsburg. I thought it was a bit harsh, that one. Again, it went to VAR. They deemed that the tackle he'd made was intentional. It didn't look like that to me, I'll be honest. Whether there's any... If it was worth them appealing that, I don't know. But I think when you slow things down like that, I think you can see what you want to see. I didn't feel like there was an intention there. It was clumsy. It was unfortunate. It looked like it was painful. But I don't think there was any intent in it. I think he was looking where the ball had gone and just happened to place his foot down on kind of the Achilles of the opposition. But he got himself sent off. Jadon Sancho was absolutely on fire. That was his 16th assist this year, and he's been involved in 30 goals all told. He becomes the first player this season to make that total. And the kid's only 20. He is absolutely terrifying. I think he's going to be such a good one. He might win me a World Cup, which I'd be delighted about if he was to do that. Wolfsburg, unfortunately, they had their 7-match unbeaten run ended by that result. They find themselves in 6th, but not a comfortable 6th. I think with results going the way they did in other games, they find themselves a little bit under pressure to keep that spot for that final Europa League place. As for Borussia Dortmund, they continue to put pressure on Bayern Munich. Moving on to Bayern Munich's first game back at home against Eintracht Frankfurt. And Bayern Munich, they were the first to score. Some good work by Muller down the left-hand side, crossed the ball in, and Goretzka was there. First time finish, absolutely spanked it home. Really clinical finish, and 1-0 Bayern Munich. And then just before half-time, Muller got a goal. Good work by Alphonso Davies down the left-hand side. And there's a little bit of confusion. Muller didn't take it or control the ball cleanly, but once he did, it had enough time to just place it past the goalkeeper. There was a little bit of confusion about offside possibilities, but the goal was allowed to stand, and it was 2-0 at half-time. And then straight after the break, Lewandowski got his inevitable goal. He always scores, and this time it was Coleman who did some good work on the right-hand side, got to the byline, cut it back, and it was the easiest of headers for Lewandowski to make it 3-0. And so you think, home and hosed, just need to see the game out, and stereotypically, they did not do that. And in fact, there was 2 headed goals from corners that got Frankfurt massively back into this game. So on 52 minutes, Hinteregger, he scored. It was a weird one, really, where it seemed that the Munich defenders were just allowing him the time he needed to control the ball and get a shot off. It wasn't a clinical, clean strike at all, but it got the job done. And then 3 minutes later, he was there again. This time with a header, powerful header, giving Neuer absolutely no chance in goal there. And all of a sudden, it was back to 3-2. So everyone's thinking, "Wow, okay, well, this is game on." Anyway, 6 minutes later, normality was restored, and it was Davis actually who ran powerfully at the defence. It kind of ricocheted around. There was opportunities for the defenders to smash it into row Z. They didn't. It ended up coming back to Davis somehow, and he slotted home past the keeper, and 4-2 was the score after that. It wasn't all good news for Hinteregger, by the way. Having scored 2, he then put through his own goal with about 15 minutes to go. The eventual score being 5-2. So Bayern Munich, they are absolutely on fire right now. They still remain unbeaten in the calendar year 2020. Lewandowski maintains the pace that Gerd Muller set in 1971-72 season for scoring 27 goals after 27 rounds of fixtures. Muller, he and Jadon Sancho are having an assist off. They're both on 17 right now. Bayern Munich, just a machine. 37 points from a possible 39 in the last games. And they've actually increased their average games per goal ratio at 3.2, which is astonishing since Flick arrived at the club. Both we'll definitely have a look at the game coming up between Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich, but both teams are hitting really top form in the run-in now to the end of the season. So I'm looking forward to that, I have to say. As for As for Eintracht Frankfurt, they are really in trouble, it seems to me. They are only 2 points above the relegation zones right now, and in massive trouble. Let's see what happened at Schalke versus Augsburg, and both of these teams coming into the game were absolutely in appalling form. So something had to crack, and unfortunately for Schalke fans, it was them that continue their awful run right now, with the Augsburg running out 3-0 winners. This was played on Sunday, very early. Lauren, it was, that scored a absolutely stunning free kick, hit just absolutely perfectly. It was about 25 yards out, it must have been, and it was a beautifully dipping, wickedly struck free kick to open the scoring there. Yeah, again, lots of huffing and puffing. Schalke really didn't do a great deal in this game, and it was actually Basie who was able to capitalise on some pretty ordinary defending. A ball comes in from deep, the defender tries to cut it out at source, fails to do so. Basie's through on goal and absolutely smashes it home. Really crisp finish. Makes it 2-0. And then in the last few minutes of the game, into injury time, Cordova again was able to capitalise on some, again, ordinary defending, just kind of, boneheaded, not really thinking. Just a nice simple finish. But they were not helping themselves, weren't Schalke, and they are in really desperate form right now. So Schalke are on the longest winless run of any team in the Bundesliga right now, and Schalke are in 8th, and they are really hanging on right now. And you've got to think that David Wagner is in trouble if he doesn't start getting some results pretty sharpish. Alright, we'll take a quick break there, and when we come back we'll round up the last few games that happened in the Bundesliga this weekend, and then we'll preview some of the important games that are happening in Germany. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. In the previous part of the podcast, we looked at some of the games that happened in the Bundesliga this weekend, and we're going to continue now to round those games off in German football, as well as look forward to the Englische Woche, which is the German term for midweek games, the English week. So we'll start by looking at Mainz versus RB Leipzig, and Leipzig were looking to get a better result than they did for the past week, where they could only get a draw with Freiburg, and they put things right. And I kind of predicted, I thought that they might be angry with the result from last week. Mainz, who are really struggling, they are only one place away from being in the relegation zone. They got off to a fairly decent start. Leipzig, after 11 minutes, Werner got a goal. It was chipped in from the right-hand side, and a really tidy little finish. There was plenty for him to do there, and he got off the snide because he'd not scored for a long while, so it was good for a return to form for Werner. And then after 23 minutes, Poulsen scored again. Scored last week, scored this week. Another header, another powerful header, and then Sabitzer, he got a goal just before half-time to make it 3-0. A nice strike from outside of the area, and it's fairly comfortable for Leipzig after that. Werner got another goal, some nice interplay on the left channel, but runners were allowed to continue without being tracked from the Mainz point of view, and Werner was then able just to tuck it home, nice and easy. And then with 15 minutes to go, some quick thinking from Poulsen, a free kick was awarded, and he put Werner through, and he finished his hat-trick off very nicely indeed. And so a welcome return to form for Leipzig, who have been struggling just of late. They've really gone off the boil in the league. Obviously they got through against Tottenham Hotspur in the Champions League, but had found life in the Bundesliga pretty difficult of late. So they'll be glad that there's a little bit of a return to form there. Interestingly, well, I mean, you may disagree. I think it's interesting. Every single out player on the Leipzig team was involved in at least one goal-scoring chance. Isn't that incredible? So Mainz, they're really struggling. They had a modicum of form coming into this game, but their 3-game unbeaten run was pretty significantly halted by Leipzig. What this game had, and the next game that I'm going to review had in common, was that they both piped in crowd noises. It was really interesting at various different points of the game. There was definitely a home bent to the sound effects, so there was whistling for any decisions against the home team, and cheers obviously for when goals went in. And it definitely made it seem a more interesting watch, shall we say. I don't know. I was a fan. And it was kind of like, canned crowd noise. Yeah, I don't know. That's something certainly to look into, I think, for the other teams, maybe. In this game, though, in Cologne versus Dusseldorf actually went 2-0 up in this one. Goal just before half-time, a deflected shot from Karaman, and then, just before Dusseldorf scored their second, Cologne were awarded a penalty. They missed it, and they went down the other end, basically, and Tommy scored on 61 minutes, so they went 2-0 up, and were looking good for a win. However, with 2 minutes to go of regular time, Modesti got on the end of a cracking cross and thumped in a header, and then in injury time, Cordoba he got on the end of another great cross, another thumping header to make it 2 apiece. So they somehow got away with a home draw in this one. The fake crowd went wild at the end there, but just an interesting experiment. I quite liked it. But Dusseldorf could really have done with that win. They are really struggling down in the relegation places right now, and so that will feel like a defeat for them. I'm absolutely positive. In the other game that we haven't covered, Paderborn, the perennial drawers of games, they got another 1 apiece draw, this time with Hoffenheim. So all of that meant that Bayern Munich remain 4 points clear on 61 points after 27 games, in front of Borussia Dortmund on 57. Then in third, Leipzig enjoyed that big win, and they're on 54 points, 3 behind Dortmund, with Bayer Leverkusen moving into the 4th position at the expense of Borussia Mönchengladbach, who are on 53 and 52 points respectively, with Wolfsburg quite a ways back now, 13 points behind those teams in 6th place. There's quite a gaggle of teams below Wolfsburg within 6 points. You can go down as far as Hertha Berlin in 10th. So they would consider themselves still in contention for that last European spot. Down in the relegation zone, I think you have to say that Union Berlin are in deep. They've got 30 points, with Eintracht Frankfurt in 14th below them on 28 points. In 15th place is Mainz, who are really struggling, 27 points. Fortuna Dusseldorf could really have done with that win, and they remain in 16th. They would have gone out of the relegation zone had they clung on to that win, so that's a huge disappointment for them. Werder Bremen, despite their win, they remain in 17th, with Paderborn flat last on 18 points. Alright, let's take a look at the game, a couple of the games that are going to be happening in the midweek fixtures. The big game is going to be Borussia Dortmund versus Bayern Munich, the Klassiker. That's on Tuesday at 9:30am. If you want to tune in for that, it should be a cracker. Both teams coming into this with really good form. They've only lost, Bayern Munich have only lost twice since Hansi Flick took charge. And his actual debut game was when they played Borussia Dortmund in the reverse fixture. There was a convincing 4-0 defeat of them. Yeah, the last team to have actually taken points from Bayern Munich had been RB Leipzig, and that was a 0-0 draw way back in February. Really top form. It seems that all of their big players are actually in good form too. It will be a terrifying kind of prospect, I suspect, for Borussia Dortmund, who don't tend to fare too well in recent memory in these games. I remember last season when Dortmund were kind of running away with the title a little bit, and then just could not buy a win. And they got a good old-fashioned thumping against Bayern Munich towards the back end of the season. It's pretty much season over for Dortmund's chances in terms of title runs. And so, kind of comes at the similar sort of time as well. This game. Jadon Sancho, he got through the game at the weekend without injury worries. He had gone into the first game back with a little bit of a groin niggle, but that looks to have improved. The Dortmund manager is going to be able to choose from a pretty fit squad. Mats Hummels, of course, he used to play for Bayern Munich. He'll be playing, and he'll be looking forward to that, no doubt. The other exciting head-to-head is, of course, Haaland versus Lewandowski, two of the great strikers in Europe right now. Haaland, obviously, he joined in January. He's already notched 10 times, and that's a rate of 1 goal in every 69, which is absolutely bonkers. As we've already discussed, that Lewandowski is on pace for all sorts of records. Gerd Müller, an absolute legend of German football, is a great person to be compared to. And Lewandowski has a decent record in this fixture. Of course, he used to play for Borussia Dortmund. He scored 16 goals for Bayern and 1 for Dortmund. He's actually scored 12 goals in the last 6 Die Klassikers. So he likes this fixture, I think, is what we're getting at there. I'm really looking forward to that. Like I said, that's at 9:30 on Tuesday Pacific time. The Klassiker is absolutely the highlight of the week. Some of the other games that may be of interest: Bayer Leverkusen play Wolfsburg, Eintracht Frankfurt play Freiburg, Werder Bremen host Borussia Mönchengladbach, Hertha Berlin visit Leipzig on Wednesday. That's the early game at 9:30. And then the later games on Wednesday: Hoffenheim play Cologne, Fortuna Düsseldorf play Schalke, Augsburg host Paderborn, and Mainz visit Union Berlin. I look forward to reviewing some of those things, maybe on Thursday. What we'll do then, we'll take a quick break and then we'll come back with some of the news from around the world of soccer, especially in the European leagues and in MLS. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back. In the previous parts of the podcast, we looked back at the weekend of Bundesliga that was, and we also looked at the Klassiker coming up on Tuesday, as well as look forward to some of the other games that are available to watch during the week in Germany. So what we'll do now, though, is we'll take a quick look at some of the headlines from around the world, various different leagues, especially in Europe and in MLS. The first thing we're going to look at is Premier League. They've been going through some pretty rigorous testing right now, and it had come to light that 6 people had been confirmed as positive for coronavirus in 19 different teams. There's been a further 2 coronavirus cases confirmed. One is an unnamed player from Bournemouth. We are told that they will not disclose who that player is, but they have now been told to self-isolate for 7 days. We are as yet unaware of where the 8th positive test comes from. There have now been almost 1,000 tests being carried out on players and staff throughout the Premier League. And we've had 8 confirmed cases now. So I don't know what success looks like in this situation. I mean, to me, it feels like 0 would be success. But in order for training to step up, I think there's got to be something close to that for the next round of testing. But this is obviously something that we will keep an eye on. In the Bundesliga, Borussia Dortmund have announced that Mario Götze will definitely leave the club at the end of the season. Their sporting director, Michael Zorc, he said that he wanted to extend his admiration for the player. He said that we will part ways with Mario this summer. It was a mutual and respectful decision. He is a great man. Obviously, an unbelievable record. He scored a winning goal in the World Cup, most notably against Argentina a few World Cups ago. And yeah, a bit of a club legend there. And I'm sure that there'll be some teams looking to take him on board. Someone with a great experience of the very highest level of football. La Liga has been allowed to resume play. It obviously will be behind closed doors. It will start on June the 8th. And yeah, permission was given by the Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez. Obviously, Spain has been quite hard hit with the coronavirus, and it's only maybe in the last 2 weeks or so that a very strict lockdown has been lifted, and people have been allowed to go and exercise and walk around the block. things are gathering pace here. Spain has done what it should, and now new horizons are opening for everyone. The time has come to bring back many day-to-day activities, said the Prime Minister. He announced that from the 8th of June, La Liga will be back. Spanish football has a huge following, but it will not be the only recreational activity that will return, so that's pretty hopeful. As well as La Liga, the second division in Spanish football will also be set to resume, and I think the first game is going to be the derby between Sevilla and Real Betis. In terms of the testing that La Liga is doing, 5 players have tested positive for the virus so far, but that includes the 2 top divisions. They recently allowed the first phase of group training to happen from May the 18th. So that's all very encouraging. Let's just hope that everyone's really sensible and stays safe. One thing that's been quite heartening is that there's not been any supporters at the stadiums, and I hope that that continues to be the case. Moving on to MLS, this was a really weird story. So, reported last week that Jaap Stam was going to be the head coach at FC Cincinnati, and indeed that proved to be the case, and the social media people at Cincinnati posted the wrong picture. What had happened was, I think a photo had been tagged incorrectly in whatever files they have and photo libraries and things. And what they ended up having was a photo of some guy I'd never actually heard of. It's called Tinus van Tunebroek, who also was at Ajax as a youth team coach. He's also fairly balding and menacing looking. But not the right guy. But that was taken up by many MLS clubs and their social media people, and so they were posting pictures of Jason Statham and Mark Strong and Bruce Willis and Dr. Evil and Philip Senderos at Houston, and so and saying welcome Jaap, to much hilarity. Pitbull was another picture that somebody used, so that was pretty funny. Anyway, I think Jaap Stam apparently has actually been mistaken for this person before now anyway, so he kind of laughed it off a little bit, but that was pretty funny. There's still more information coming out about the Major League Soccer, the tournament that they are wanting to put out there. There is going to be 4 groups, 3 groups of 6 and 1 of 8, and then there's going to be some sort of seeding going on. And so the current Supporters' Shield holders, LAFC, will get a seeding, as well as the current holders of the MLS Cup, Seattle Sounders, and the Open Cup winners, Atlanta United, and also the hometown, which will be Orlando City. And in the 8-team group, Toronto FC will be a further seed in that group. That's pretty interesting. They are looking at maybe having an 18-game regular season on top of this kind of round-robin tournament. I also reported last week that some of the players are actually not massively in favour of all of this, with the idea of being away from their families for weeks on end during this really difficult time. And I really can't quibble with that, I've got to say. The final bit from MLS that I wanted to cover was there's still ongoing discussions between the league and the Players Association, and they're looking for a 10% salary cut just whilst all of this is going on, to ensure that clubs can remain solvent through this shutdown. There's been a counter offer from the Players Association of 7.5% cut. So this is ongoing. It's very, very complicated, especially as there's no collective bargaining agreement just yet anyway. Discussions are ongoing, and if anything happens, then you'll be the first to find out. One last little kind of heartening story. This comes from the Danish Superliga, who are going to start up again on Thursday. And one of their clubs, Aarhus, they're going to install great big screens where, as fans of that club, you can go on the Zoom channel and they will, they're calling it the world's first virtual grandstand. And so fans can support them for free, on Zoom. And there will even be a section for the away fans, which is incredible. They are saying that it's all about creating an atmosphere around the game so that players can see that they have the support from the city, even though there's no supporters in the stands. That would be really interesting to see. And we talked about the idea of noise being piped in over the speakers in the stadium. It's just probably a little bit of an extension of that, which is great to see. And so, yeah, they'll have all of these great big massive screens on the edge of the field. Might get a little bit more of a sense of people watching, and maybe some urgency will be created because of that. All right, well, I think we'll leave it there. When we come back, I'm going to look at some of the possible transfers and the rumours that are going around regarding where players might end up, should the transfer window become open at any point. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. In the previous part of the podcast, we just looked at some of the news that's going around the various different leagues, especially in Europe and MLS. In this section, I'd like to focus on the transfer rumours that are going on around the world and see where see who your club are looking to procure should the transfer window open up at any point. We're going to start with Paul Pogba. He's never far away from some sort of transfer rumour, and because of his agent, Mino Raiola, the talk is that he has begun discussions with Juventus about a move in the summer. There's also interest, we are told, from Real Madrid and Paris Saint-Germain. Paul Pogba's 27. He's never really settled at Manchester United, in my opinion. I mean, he was an absolutely unbelievable player at Juventus, and then did all right in the Euros when France won it. When France got to the finals of the Euros, and then was a big player when they won the World Cup too. But he's never really done it at Manchester, and this is his second go at doing so. He moved on after he wasn't getting a game under Sir Alex Ferguson, and decided that a move to Juventus was probably better for his development, and since then has come back for a record fee, in actual fact, for Manchester United. Interesting to see where he would end up. Manchester United are also, and we've mentioned this before, quite keen on Jadon Sancho, but it looks like Bayern Munich might be in the running for him too. That is a fairly well-trodden path from Borussia Dortmund to Bayern Munich, and obviously Lewandowski being the most notable of that just recently. So who knows about that? Barcelona are in trouble. They might be kind of selling all sorts of players this summer just to remain open as a business. They say they're open to offers on all but 6 of their players. Obviously Messi is not one of those, but De Jong, the young kid who came from Ajax last season. He's one of the ones that are untouchable, as well as Ter Stegen, the goalkeeper from Germany. So that'll be interesting to see kind of where people go there. Notable, not on that list, is Suarez. I'm sure there'd be a lot of interest if he became available. Sergio Aguero's agent has denied suggestions that he might leave Manchester City, but there are rumours that he might fancy a trip back to Argentina. He's 31, and it's an odd situation with Aguero because he is Manchester City's highest goal scorer, maybe just in the Premier League, might be of all time, but he's never really one of those players that anyone says, oh yeah, he would get in my team of the year. But he has consistently been absolutely brilliant for City. He's unspectacular, I think, in some ways, isn't he? I don't know what it is that puts people off from thinking he's one of the greatest all-time Premier League players. Yeah, I think also when Pep first got here, I think maybe he didn't fancy him too much, and he's worked with him and made him a better player. And at this point, maybe in his career, he's looking for something to do that's not in Manchester. I don't know. Interesting to keep an eye on that. Willian, who's out of contract at the end of this season, he has been holding out for a 3-year extension at Chelsea. Because that has not materialised, he has said that it's become difficult for him to hang around. I reckon that there'll be a lot of top teams coming for Willian. He's super underrated in my opinion. Skillful, gets about the pitch. I think he's perfect for the Premier League. And I'm surprised that Chelsea might not want to kind of keep him on for a little bit longer. Maybe not the 3 years, but maybe longer than a 1-year extension, say. Ainsley Maitland-Niles, who is the Arsenal right-back. Well, kind of right-sided player. I don't suppose he would consider himself to be a defender, but he's currently playing there. He wants to leave because apparently he's fallen out with Mikel Arteta. I kind of rate him. He looks like a good build for a midfielder, winger type style. I think there's definitely a player in there. Philippe Coutinho, he's someone that we've kept coming back to. All sorts of teams are after understanding what his intentions are after this season. He's currently on loan at Bayern Munich. His parent club is Barcelona, but he's not really getting a game there. But Chelsea, United and Leicester are interested. That would be an incredible buy for Leicester if they were able to pull that off. Goodness me. They're also in the running for Adam Lallana from Liverpool. He's never really established himself at Liverpool. He's 32 years old. He was a regular in the England squad for a good long while. But again, there's not enough goals in him. I think that's been his big downfall, that there are so many glaring opportunities that he's squandered in front of goal that he's never really trained on to be that really dependable attacking midfielder. Maybe Brendan Rodgers could get hold of him and turn him into the player that there's definitely in there. People, clubs also interested in him. Crystal Palace, Everton, West Ham and Arsenal. Interesting to see where he ends up. We've mentioned Rabiot, who plays at Juventus. He's a French midfielder. Arsenal again are interested in him as well as Everton. At the moment, we've got Guendouzi in the middle of the Arsenal midfield, who I always feel he's always let down by the people around him, and he ends up trying to do too much, gets out of position because he feels he has to be the one that's energetic and attacking, and then leaves himself open for some of the other more defensive work that he's been asked to do. So I think maybe someone more reliable next to him in the centre of midfield, and I think that he would definitely benefit from that. There was a funny little story from the Emre Can interview where he said that he would never consider a move to Manchester United because, he quoted, his heart would not allow it after playing for Liverpool for such a long time. So I'm sure he, all the Manchester United fans were delighted to hear that. And yeah, no, I don't think anybody brought it up. I think that might be the interesting point of all of that. Nobody from Manchester United have said anything. So anyway, That I found that quite amusing. We'll call it a day on the transfer window. When we come back, it's the final part of the show, and as always, we're going to do. I'm going to do the section of the show that I'm calling "Around the World in 80 Soccer Moments," which is a look at some of the significant happenings in the sport that we love. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. In the previous section of the podcast, I looked at some of the transfer rumours and speculation about various different players from clubs all around Europe and the world. In this section, we're going to focus on the regular section of the show that I'm calling Around the World in 80 Soccer Moments. And this is a look at some of the more significant parts, happenings that have really shaped the sport. And this time, we're going to focus on the Italy versus Chile game in the World Cup of 1962, the game they dubbed the Battle of Santiago, and we're also going to look at the day that Iceland beat England in the last 16 of the Euros in 2016. Yeah, if I feel really depressed at the end of this podcast, you'll know the reason why. Anyway, we'll start with, and this is an astonishing event. Chile played Italy in the World Cup in 1962, and this was a group stage clash. And before the game, I remember, I wasn't alive at the time it went out, but it's gone down in sort of legend, the way that this game's highlights were introduced on the BBC a couple of days after the game had happened. Because it was played in Chile, the actual footage had to go on a plane and it would get played about a day later. So these highlights are kind of gone down in infamy, really. David Coleman was the host and commentator at the match itself, and he described it as the most stupid, appalling, disgusting, disgraceful exhibition of football possibly in the history of the game. And he goes on to say how this kind of thing should be totally squashed, that if the World Cup needs to kind of kick on, then it needs to sort out teams that play in this fashion. And goodness me, it was ridiculous. So the build-up to this game was that the Italian journalists that were out there had not a good word to say about Santiago. They described it in all sorts of derogatory terms. When the Chileans heard about this, they had some choice words to say about Italians, and so there was this build-up of kind of tension in the lead-up to this game. Chile had actually suffered a really horrendous earthquake just before hosting this tournament, one of, if not the biggest ever recorded. And so they were kind of recovering from that, and then having to host an international sporting event. the run-up to the game was all about trading insults with each other. Well, the first foul happened in the first 12 seconds after kickoff. The standard had been set from there on in. And with 5 minutes gone, there's all sorts of kicking out and punches thrown. Like, literally, like, the ball's nowhere near these players, and this sort of stuff is happening. And then, there was more of all of this sort of stuff. And then Farini, the Italian defender, is sent off for just an absolute hack of a Chilean player. This is only after 8 minutes. But he refuses to leave the field, so the police have to come on. There's like 20 people around him as he leaves this field. Then there's another incident a little bit later on where Sanchez has the ball on the left wing. He has his back to an Italian defender. And this this defender, Mario David, just hacks at him. Just like absolutely awful kind of challenge. And this Sanchez fella gets up and clocks him with an unbelievable left hook. Fella's out cold. But unbelievably, the referee does not send Sanchez off. And maybe I think that kind of just escalates everything. That after 41 minutes, Mario David gets his revenge on Sanchez. And I am not joking when I say it is a neck-high challenge. The ball comes over and he tackles him neck high. He gets sent off. Italy are down to 9 men. Chile take the lead in the second half, a header. There's then some more tackling in the centre of the field, like rugby tackling, and then there's like a wrestling match starts. Chile score again. Italy get beat 2-0. There's further intervention by the police. There's 3 more occasions where the police have to be brought onto the field. And Ken Ashton, who is the referee, he calls a halt to the game early and just blows up because it was just getting utterly, utterly ridiculous. That referee went on to invent yellow and red cards on the back of his experience in that game. So can you imagine not having any kind of recourse? You could either say, stop doing that, lads, or send the person off. And that was the only way that he could punish. Incredible stuff. If you do get a chance to watch the David Coleman highlights, he is absolutely beside himself with anger that the game of football has been in such disrepute during this game. It is quite astonishing. Alright. Something a little bit more upbeat, but certainly not for me, I don't think, really. And this is the time that Iceland beat England in Euro 2016. England were just an average team, really, but we had good players. Wayne Rooney, for one, who was England's top goal scorer. Iceland were participating in their first ever major championships. They had qualified brilliantly to get to this point, and they'd done enough in the group stages to warrant a place in the round of 16. There was only 8 teams that didn't progress from the 24 that were in the original tournament. So the round of 16 pitted England versus Iceland. England had done alright in their group matches. They had drawn 2 and won 1 against Wales in the very last minute to win 2-1 in that game. But England went into this thinking that they should absolutely roll Iceland over. And we scored early on as a good goal. Rooney from way out scores a good goal. And nerves were settled. And I was feeling a lot better about life because I was very nervous coming into this game. I'm a big England fan. If we can lose a game or we can manufacture a way of losing a game, then we tend to do that, especially in big tournaments. Anyway, almost immediately, Iceland get a throw in, and it gets lobbed into the box. A huge tactic of theirs, and the ball bounces around. They win the second ball. Joe Hart is very disappointingly beaten on his left-hand side to equalise. Pretty much the same thing happens about 5-10 minutes later. Another ball into the box, It just ricochets around, and exactly the same hand of Joe Hart misses it again, and we are 2-1 down. England are 2-1 down. I'm trying to be as neutral as possible on all this. The second half ranks about the worst I've ever seen an England team play. I remember watching it in a bar. There was nobody there really. Everyone had sort of given up on England, I think. And I was on my knees at the end in absolute despair at how bad England were. They just could not pick a pass. They couldn't trap a ball. Rooney was just absolutely the shadow of his self. It was just that the pressure had got to everybody in that team. Iceland were organised, did what they set out to do, and did it miles better than what England did, and deserved thoroughly their win. And so they went through to the quarterfinals, which was an unbelievable achievement for a small nation like Iceland. And from that, obviously, you got the thunderclap, and it was a euphoria that swept everybody along. You know, they were everyone's favourite second team. On the strength of that, England got rid of their manager and installed... actually, they installed Sam Allardyce first. But, he lasted one game after some sort of allegations were made against him. He resigned, and then we had Gareth Southgate. And he got hold of them and made an actual team out of some really good individuals. England getting beat to Iceland, the smallest nation ever to appear in a major tournament, and losing 2-1. All right, I think we'll call it a day there. Thank you for making it this far. Really, really appreciate it. I'd also really appreciate if you get the opportunity to rate and review the podcast from wherever you get yours from. Also, give us a follow on the social media. We are at GSMC_soccer on Instagram and Twitter. And that's where you should let me know any comments that you have, anything you've enjoyed or want to comment on during the last hour or so. We'll do this all again on Thursday when I will preview the week's games in Bundesliga, the midweek games. And, we'll have all the usual stuff as well. Until then, thank you again, and stay safe.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.